Now that you know how to use many of these monitoring tools, we need to be able to calculate performance baselines. Now, this is going to be something that you will do on individual servers because performance and performance requirements will be different from one server to another. Before I can create a baseline, the first thing I need to do is interpret performance trends, meaning if my CPU is at 60% utilization on average, what does that actually mean? Well, we know it means it's 60% utilized, but what does that mean for my application? Is that medium usage? Is that high usage? Is it unacceptable? We don't know. That still means you have 40% of your CPU not being utilized, but that leads to questions like how often does it actually spike to 100% if 60% is the average? What we would need to do, depending on what the server runs, if it's running some application, you may have to go back to the vendor and ask the vendor for guidance. Now, they will have this in documentation. So they'll give you the CPU requirements, memory requirements, disk requirements. Sometimes they have network requirements. So they'll let you know what you actually need, how performance should actually be measured. We also need to perform capacity planning. Like before I build a server, ideally, I would have enough system resources in it because I don't want to go buy a physical server and then have to, a month later, go buy additional memory for that server. So we would perform some capacity planning based on what resources the server needs. To get to that point, you have to understand what the server actually runs. Is this going to be a domain controller, a DNS server, a DHCP server, a database, an email server? What is it going to do? And what are the requirements for the operating system? And what are the additional requirements for each application that I intend to run on the server to help you get to the capacity of the server itself? Now, many of the tools we looked at would help you identify bottlenecks. Performance Monitor, Resource Monitor, Task Manager, all those would help you look at individual applications and see how they are consuming resources on the system, and maybe you need to move an application to a different server. Or if you have multiple applications on the same server, they may just combined consume too many resources, so you simply need to have those located on different servers in your environment. We need to analyze performance trends so we can be predictive as to when capacity would be exhausted. One of the things I've done in the past, when I was a CTO, we would make predictions. We would monitor processor usage for clients, for servers, and we would predict when clients need to be upgraded. Now, that's a huge concern on the client side. I could not go to my chief financial officer in December and say, all of our Windows 10 machines, thousands of machines, they're a little too slow. So next month, can we start purchasing thousands of machines? No, that's not a conversation you can have. Because the natural question is, why would you tell me this now that the computers are slow? Why did you not tell me this a year ago before they were slow? Well, if we're doing our job correctly, we would have predicted when they would actually become slow. So we could say, hey, next year's budget, we need to replace a certain amount of these PCs because based on our trend analysis, we think that these will be at their max acceptable CPU utilization, memory utilization at this time. Just helps for future planning. And there are more advanced tools that help you actually do that, but those you'd have to pay for and license. And plan for capacity for the hardware components. So that's processor, disk, memory, network. Just make sure they're adequate in all of your physical machines. Now, monitoring virtual machines, that is much more forgiving. Some of the considerations on the virtual machine side, we have to assign them sufficient resources for the workload. So one virtual machine may run a SQL database. It may require 16 gigs of memory. Another may be a domain controller. Domain controllers do not work very hard. It may only require 4 gigs of memory and runs well with just 4 gigs of memory. If multiple VMs run on a host, ensure the host has enough resources. That is beyond important. Much more important than the virtual machine being assigned appropriate resources. Because with a virtual machine, I could simply go to the settings and I could assign additional memory, additional virtual CPUs whenever I want to on demand. Now, we call that just-in-time resources for the virtual machine, but that is being pulled from the host. So the host has to have those resources. Then we allocate whatever resources we believe required to individual virtual machines. And that goes to this. Our resources are shared, so the performance of one virtual machine can affect the performance of others. Meaning if you allocate a lot of memory to one VM, it's not available for other virtual machines. All that goes back to the resources in the host. And when you monitor this, you have to remember to monitor resource utilization on the host and the guest virtual machines as well. So both of those have to be monitored because you could have a surplus of resources on the host. Very low utilization on the host is possible, but if you've only assigned 4 gigs of memory to your virtual machine and one virtual CPU, you could still have a virtual machine that's actually resource starved. And if that's your database server, we'll say, it may run poorly in a degraded state. So we need to monitor both virtual machines and the physical host.